Hey guys, tonight we're going to sink into a very different side of history. We're going to dim the lights on the grandeur of the Roman Empire and peer into its shadows. Tonight, we explore the lives of the men who held absolute power in their hands, only to let it twist and contort them into figures of legend and infamy. The emperors who were not just powerful, but terrifying, not just wealthy, but utterly depraved. So before you get too comfortable, let's begin our journey. You might think of Rome as the city of emperors and legions, of marble statues and golden triumphs. But even in a civilization built on order and law, there were men who ruled by whim, fear, and madness. Men who weren't just the masters of the known world, but slaves to their own darkest desires. The stories you're about to hear are not for the faint of heart, but they are a fascinating look at what happens when humanity is given a crown without a conscience. So ease into the darkness, let the day's worries drift away, and let's travel back to ancient Rome together. We begin with the man whose name has become a synonym for madness, Caligula. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, he was beloved by the people at first. His reign began in AD 37 with a wave of hope. He was the son of Germanicus, a military hero adored by all, and a direct descendant of Augustus. The future seemed bright. But as the months passed, a darkness began to creep into the emperor's mind, a sickness, one that would lead to a reign of terror so bizarre it seems to defy belief. Caligula began his reign with promises of reform, a generous heart, and a seemingly stable mind. He pardoned political prisoners. He repealed unpopular taxes, and he put on games that were the talk of the city. He was the people's prince, the new hope for Rome. But then, after a sudden, severe illness early in his rule, something shifted. The kind young man who had charmed the masses seemed to vanish, replaced by a ruthless and paranoid tyrant, a man who began to see himself not as an emperor, but as a living god. He ordered statues of himself to be placed in temples, demanding worship from Roman citizens and foreign dignitaries alike. He dressed in the golden robes of Apollo, the winged sandals of Mercury, and the breastplate of Minerva. He was the god on earth, and his word was law, no matter how ridiculous or cruel. He built a palace so large it consumed entire city blocks. He had a reputation for sleeping with the wives of senators. The madness reached its peak with his famous horse, Incitatus. Caligula loved the horse and showered him with riches. The horse lived in a marble stall with an ivory manger, slept under a purple blanket, and wore jeweled-encrusted collars. The emperor even threatened to make Incitatus a consul, one of the most powerful positions in Rome, as a way to mock the very Senate he despised. It was a bizarre, humiliating gesture that summed up his reign perfectly. Caligula didn't just want power. He wanted to show everyone that he could do whatever he wanted, and they could do nothing about it. His cruelty was as legendary as his madness. He loved to watch people suffer. During games, if a gladiator was not dying fast enough, he would have him dragged out to be butchered. If he ran out of criminals to throw to the lions, he would send in members of the audience. He had senators tortured, their children executed in front of them, and then forced the fathers to attend a party as if nothing had happened. He even had a favorite phrase, "Let them hate me so long as they fear me." Caligula was a monster of his own making, a man who had everything but found joy only in the suffering of others. And as the years went on, his paranoia grew. He saw plots everywhere. He became obsessed with his own mortality, believing that his enemies were constantly trying to poison him. He even made it a policy to have his food tasted by an imperial taster to avoid poison. Yet the emperor, who feared death so much, created a world of death and fear for everyone else. His end was swift and arguably deserved. On January 24th, AD 41, a conspiracy of senators and Praetorian guards, men who had been humiliated and terrified by him, ambushed him in a secret corridor of his palace. The man who had proclaimed himself a god fell in a hail of daggers. His reign of madness had lasted just under 4 years. Caligula's story is a chilling reminder that power without limits is a poison that consumes not just the people it rules, but the person who wields it. But he was not the only one. We now turn to a man whose infamy is perhaps even greater, a man whose name is synonymous with cruelty, artistic obsession, and the great fire of Rome.
Born in AD 37, Nero's path to the throne was paved with manipulation and murder, orchestrated by his ambitious mother, Agrippina the Younger. He became emperor at the tender age of 16. At first, his reign, like Caligula's, was one of promise. Advised by the great philosopher Seneca, Nero was a patron of the arts, a composer, a poet. He lowered taxes, banned capital punishment, and was lauded as a sensitive and forward-thinking ruler. But the darkness in him would soon emerge. His first victim was his own mother, Agrippina. He grew tired of her influence and her constant machinations. After several failed attempts to poison her, he devised a more elaborate plot. He had a ship built that would collapse in the middle of a lake, hoping to drown her. When she survived and swam to shore, he had her stabbed to death in her own home. The man who had once been known for his kindness had now committed the ultimate patricide. The year is AD 64. A fire broke out in Rome. It raged for 9 days, consuming 10 of the city's 14 districts. The city was a sea of flames. To this day, historians debate whether Nero himself started the fire. The Roman historian Tacitus suggests that Nero was blamed, but it's more likely that the fire was accidental, a common occurrence in the tightly packed city. But Nero's actions afterward were suspicious. He allegedly played his lyre or sang while watching the city burn, famously saying, "What a magnificent artist dies in me." The people of Rome were horrified, not just by the fire, but by their emperor's detached and artistic response. Needing a scapegoat, he pointed his finger at the Christians, a small and often misunderstood religious group in Rome. He accused them of arson and began a horrific persecution. Christians were arrested, tortured, and brutally executed. Some were covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified. But the most horrifying spectacle was when he had them covered in pitch and set on fire to serve as human torches to light his garden parties at night. This wasn't just punishment, it was a form of entertainment, a monstrous display of cruelty that cemented his infamy. Nero's reign was a constant battle between his artistic desires and his duty to rule. He built a magnificent palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, on the ruins of the city. He bankrupted the empire with his lavish spending, his wild parties, and his extravagant artistic projects. He even appeared on stage himself in plays and musical performances, something a Roman emperor was never supposed to do. The senators and nobles of Rome watched in disgust as their emperor made a mockery of his position. They saw him not as a god, but as a buffoon. The end of Nero's reign was a tragic and bloody affair, as multiple conspiracies and rebellions against him broke out across the empire. He became a hunted man. On June 9th, AD 68, with his enemies closing in on him and no one left to turn to, he took his own life. His final words, as he plunged a dagger into his throat, were a testament to his own inflated ego. "What an artist dies in me." Nero's reign was a descent from promise into utter depravity, a story of a man who believed his artistic soul gave him a license for boundless cruelty. And finally, we turn to a lesser-known but equally bizarre emperor whose reign proved that an emperor's madness could be a spectacle not of terror, but of pure strangeness: Commodus. The son of the great philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius, Commodus was a disappointment from the start. He was a man obsessed not with philosophy or with the well-being of the empire, but with his own image.
His greatest passion was for the arena. He believed he was the reincarnation of Hercules, the hero of Greek myth. He dressed in lion skins, carried a club, and had statues of himself erected all over the city, portraying himself as a god. But his most bizarre obsession was his desire to be a gladiator. He would enter the arena himself, fighting in staged battles that were fixed in his favor. He would fight men who were crippled or weakened by disease or opponents with blunted weapons. The crowd, terrified of their emperor, would cheer him on, but in their hearts they saw a pathetic figure, a man who desperately wanted to be a hero, but was too cowardly to truly fight. He even began to refer to Rome itself as Colonia Commodiana, a ridiculous renaming of the Eternal City in his own honor. He would demand that the senators of Rome hail him as the conqueror of 1,000 gladiators, even though he was an emperor, not a gladiator. He was a man who had everything, but desperately craved the glory of someone else's life. His rule was filled with executions, plots, and a bizarre series of decisions that pushed the empire to the brink of chaos. The end of Commodus's reign was as strange as his life. In AD 192, a conspiracy was formed against him. His own mistress, Marcia, his chamberlain, Eclectus, and the praetorian prefect, Quintus, were all involved. The plot was simple. Marcia would poison him, but the poison made him sick, not dead. Terrified that he would discover the plot, the conspirators sent a wrestler named Narcissus to strangle him in his bath. Commodus, the man who saw himself as a great hero, was killed not in a heroic battle, but in a pathetic, quiet struggle against a man much stronger than he was. So, as the night deepens, we see a pattern in these stories. The men who held the world in their hands were often the most fragile, the most broken. Caligula, consumed by his own paranoia and cruelty. Nero, a man who saw himself as an artist but was a monster. And Commodus, a man who had an empire but desperately wanted to be a hero in the ring. Their lives are not just a list of horrors, but a reflection of the darkness that can take hold when power goes unchecked. And now, for a few more unsettling tidbits from the Roman world. The first is the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae. This was a severe form of punishment where a person's memory was erased from history. If a Roman emperor or a high-ranking official was disgraced after their death, their name would be chiseled from inscriptions, their statues would be toppled, and their portraits would be defaced. It was as if they had never existed. This was done to erase them completely from public life and history. An emperor could be erased from the record with such efficiency that centuries later, historians would find it almost impossible to know who they were. This shows the Romans' understanding of the power of memory and their willingness to use it as a weapon against their enemies. Another is the unsettling Roman defictiones, or curse tablets. These were small lead tablets, often inscribed with curses and placed in wells, temples, or even graves. The curses could be about anything. Someone wanting revenge on a thief, a spurned lover wanting their rival to suffer, or a chariot racer wanting their opponent to lose a leg. These tablets show a dark, superstitious side of Roman life, a world of curses, black magic, and a deep-seated desire for vengeance. They showed that even in a world of laws and order, people would turn to the supernatural to get what they wanted. And finally, the Roman obsession with poisoning. Poisoning was a common way to deal with rivals in Rome. It was an art form. The most infamous poisoner was a woman named Locusta, who was so good at her trade that she was hired by the Emperor Nero himself to poison his stepbrother, Britannicus. She was so skilled that she could make the poison work slowly, giving the victim a moment of hope before they were consumed by it. She was a master of her craft, and her story shows that even in the world of Roman emperors, there was always a shadow world of assassins, poisons, and death. So, as we bring our journey through the dark side of Rome to an end, it's a good time to reflect. These men were not just symbols of cruelty, but a product of a system that gave them unchecked power. A system that encouraged them to see themselves as gods and others as pawns in their games. Their stories are a chilling reminder that true power is not about ruling an empire, but about ruling oneself. So, take a moment to breathe deeply, to let the images of emperors and gladiators and poisoners fade from your mind. Focus on the feeling of the blankets, the quiet hum of your own space. You are safe. You are warm. There are no emperors to fear here, just the quiet of the night. So, rest now. The history can wait until tomorrow. Good night.